You get a guy, I like to use Sydney, but I'm going to use something else. Is it Canberra? Is that how you guys pronounce it?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, the capital. So we've got a retired politician in Canberra who's made a lot of money on the side selling cars, and he's in his 70s. He's done a lot of stuff. He wants to get in the racing game. He calls you up and says, Sheamus, I want a horse that in 2 or 3 years I can be standing there in the winner's circle at the Everest. What are you going to tell him about the money he's going to have to spend and some of the qualities you're going to look for in that equine?
Yeah, so there's sort of two ways of approaching it. I mean, the beauty, I suppose, of the Everest is, to a certain extent, you can buy your way in by doing a deal with the owners of a horse that you think are capable of winning it. Obviously, as a slot holder, so you have to have the money for the slot first, which is which is sizable. But for most of the guys who have been involved, it has been a good investment. And then as far as the horses go, look, it's quickly become the pinnacle of the sprinters in Australia. I think we've got, my parochial hat would say that we've got the best sprinters in the world, and that this is the top of the pops as far as sprinters go. So you really got two pools. You've got the established stars, and given the time of year it is, you've got the returning 3-year-olds, which really add that sort of intrigue to the mix.
For the Everest Connections, I'm AP Harold, pleased to be joined by Sheamus Mills of Sheamus Mills Bloodstock. He is the man, and we appreciate your time.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
I want to go back, not all the way to the beginning and not recently, but somewhere in the middle. And I was reading about your bio. You studied racing replays in one of your earlier jobs.
Yeah,
Man,
look.
How do you do that?
Well, basically, I just thought I was managing jockeys at the time, and I'd had a really good introduction through working at newspapers and so on, and I just found it really interesting. As in, I guess in terms of where I wanted to go, which was always Bloodstock, having some idea as to how sales translate onto race day, I found really interesting. So basically, watching videos with a couple of good form analysts and a couple of jockeys and so on, and just really reading about a horse's action, and just trying to just get in their brain a little bit, I suppose. I've always been a bit of a frustrated trainer, without the ability to get out of bed early.
Were the jockeys able to help you distinguish between what might be a really good horse but poor jockeying, or vice versa?
It was really interesting just to hear their side of their point of view. Look, I know social media and these things these days, there is just so, everybody's an armchair expert. It was interesting, and it gave you a different perspective. And I think if you watch a lot of the cam footage and that sort of stuff now, where jockeys might put, a cam on their helmet, and you see the vision of how tight they ride and the, circumstances they find themselves in, I think it gave you, it was really good from various perspectives, from the horse's point of view of understanding the animal a little bit more, and what the jockey might be reading from their behavior within a race, and then also just having that bit more understanding as to what both horse and rider are going through.
He's Sheamus Mills. I'm AP Harold. It's the Everest Connections. Now let's go all the way back. I'm going to be like the psychologist here, have you on the couch. Where did it all begin, Sheamus? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And how'd you get infected with the love of the sport of kings?
So born in Melbourne, grew up in Melbourne, infected with the love in Melbourne. Basically just grew up. My dad was obsessed by the races, more the betting side, which I was obsessed by in the early days. That's what first got me interested. And the love came from just spending time at the racetrack and in the betting ring. Back in the day when I started, there was no corporate bookies, no online sort of betting. You had to be at the track. That created an amazing atmosphere. My early memories were just of some very, all sorts of characters, which was what the great thing about it. Everything from you know, grandma having 50 cents each way on a horse to, you know, to guys just shelling out wadloads of cash. It was a great environment to be around as a kid. You just, you know, I was infected by that excitement in the first place.
I think that's one of the great things about your sport is that you mentioned, you know, grandma can put $2 down on a place or a show bet and have some skin in the game. You don't have to go to Las Vegas and be a high roller. You just get a little bit of that action and suddenly you're a lot more interested.
Yeah, well, look, my early stake was I remember my dad allowing me 50 cents per bet. So by my maths back in the day, that would cost him about $4 for the day, plus whatever I could get out of him in soft drink and hot dogs. So it actually wasn't. I've got to say, on today's economy, it was a pretty cheap day for the old man. I certainly don't get away with that sort of budget these days with my little boy. But still, as you say, I've found, you know, it's particularly I've been lucky enough to visit a few countries, and I've found that accessibility is a major thing that we need to maintain in our sport. You know, that accessibility, whether it be through ownership or obviously, you know, through gambling.
You mentioned Infected with the Love in Melbourne. That sounds like a good movie. We might want to get the Hollywood guys infected in Melbourne. But there was a great movie, The Bone Collector, in 1999. But I might label you the Philly Collector. You've done such a great job with the female equine and picking them out. How did you get your start in going places where a lot of bloodstock guys, a lot of trainers, a lot of owners don't necessarily want to go with a race day horse?
Yeah, look, fillies. Look, the breeding side of thing was what I after betting, and then just spending time at the track and really falling in love with the animal. I started working. I moved sort of from the into the. My start was in the breeding side of things, which is working on stud farms and particularly working with broodmares, who can be quite. I don't know why you'd fall in love with broodmares, given how cantankerous they can be, but. For me, that time was really when you work with the horse hands-on, and then then lunchtime, whatever else, you have the ability to look at its mother and father and parentage, and if you love the sport, and you're like, oh gosh, second dam was a half sister to one of your favorite horses or whatever it was. For me, it was a natural evolution to sort of really focus, I suppose, on those fillies because they go right through to the breeding. Because when you like breeding, now I notice, given away my age, but now I notice fillies in the second or third dam that I've known or bet on or was associated with. So, in years to come, it really builds on that database of knowledge of a family, and I find that sort of greater depth of involvement was a real spark for my interest.
When I look at the names of a couple of your more successful fillies, Daisy's very feminine, a flower. Night Raid sounds like a special ops. We're going to go after Osama bin Laden. Who are the folks that name these horses? Is that going to go to the owner? Is that going to go to the trainer? Is it conjunction? Maybe the owner's grandson getting help there?
We're big on the names. We've just actually finished the latest round of naming. Put them in. Look, it's a huge part of it for me. I think good horses have good names. I think certainly a lot of the colt syndicates and so on, and I'm led to believe Coolmore, guys like that, they keep the special names for the special horses, and so I think naming, I really put a fair bit of effort into it. I come up with some suggestions. The owners come up with some suggestions. The girls who work in my office come up with some suggestions, and then we have a good think tank over it. But I'm big on the name really reflecting the mix of mother and father.
And I think you're right that the special names for special horses, of course, it's anecdotal. We'd have to have a survey to figure it out. But think there in Australia with Winx. That's just 4 letters, and what a phenomenal horse. Man o' War, a legendary. Secretariat, 1 word. You don't necessarily need to go for the bizarre, over the top, just simple and effective. Let the horse stand on its own.
Yeah, look, there's certainly a saying that good horses make good names. So
Right.
there's probably some duds amongst them, but certainly for a lot of years, and my sort of fascination with naming came about really through what I've always considered Australia's best race, which is the Cox Plate. And I always just said to myself when I come up with a name, could this name win a Cox Plate? And if it was Banana Ripple or something, I'd be thinking to myself, no, I can't see that on the honor board there.
Sheamus Mills is our guest on the Everest Connections. I've had the pleasure to speak with Sheamus one time previously, and we can't let this pass. We're talking about names. You see, it's got the H in there in Sheamus. A brief backstory on that.
Yeah, so Irish parentage might be where the love of horses and so on came from, my mother. But yes, Seamus was, so her I'm named after my uncle, who is spelt the correct way, Seamus, but my mum decided to put the H in there so that perhaps some of the not quite so bright Australians might not call me Seamus. So the H was really just a pointer to for people to get my name right.
Well, I think the big guy upstairs, the good Lord, decided that's going to be H for horseman, a fantastic horseman. Sheamus Mills, our guest on the Everest Connections. And let's move to the big race that we cover, the Everest. And, you get a guy, I like to use Sydney, but I'm going to use something else. Is it Canberra? Is that how you guys pronounce it?
Yeah.
All right, the capital. So we've got a retired politician in Canberra who's made a lot of money on the side selling cars. And he's in his 70s. He's done a lot of stuff. He wants to get in the racing game. He calls you up and says, Sheamus, I want a horse that in 2 or 3 years, I can be standing there in the winner's circle at the Everest. What are you going to tell him about the money he's going to have to spend and some of the qualities you're going to look for in that equine?
Yeah, so there's sort of two ways of approaching it. I mean, the beauty, I suppose, of the Everest is, to a certain extent, you can buy your way in by doing a deal with the owners of a horse that you think are capable of winning it. Obviously, as a slot holder, so you have to have the money for the slot first, which is which is sizable. But for most of the guys who have been involved, it has been a good investment. And then as far as the horses go, look, it's quickly become the pinnacle of the sprinters in Australia. I think we've got, my parochial hat would say that we've got the best sprinters in the world, and that this is the top of the pops as far as sprinters go. So it's you really got two pools. You've got the established stars, and given the time of year it is, you've got the returning 3-year-olds, which really add that sort of intrigue to the mix.
And I don't think that's just your parochial hat. I know you take a lot of pride in being an Aussie, but if we look at it objectively, the Australian sprinters are no doubt right there in the mix, and many of us would think they are the best in the world. The Everest Connections, our guest is Sheamus Mills. Everest is heading into its second half decade, the 6th iteration. As you look back on this race from its creation to where it is today, how has your view or attitude on this event and this race changed, perhaps?
Yeah, look, I guess the main thing was that people were talking about was sustainability when it first came out. With the concept, like a lot of these concepts, pop-up races as they're sort of called here. Do they stand the test of time? It's hard when you're comparing them to Melbourne Cups and Cox Plates and the Australian Derby and races like this. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and look, the concept has certainly proven sustainable so far. There's a lot of interest in it. It creates the interesting thing about it has been that it's brought a new generation. Whilst a lot of the purists and older guys perhaps don't have that respect for it, they should, because it has really pulled a new audience in. And when you look at the audience both on the day and those who participate in the purchase of tickets and so on, it certainly is a new generation. So look, the race from a PR point of view has done a fantastic job, and you only need to look at the honor board to say that from a ratings point of view, it certainly holds its own.
Another neat thing around the spring carnival is the ready to race sale. That adds to some of the mystique and fun, and certainly the industry happenings. How much of that have you been involved with?
Yeah, look, ready to run is an interesting concept down here. Each jurisdiction seems to have its own little nuances. One thing that Australia, I would say, is that ready to run concept is still building. In America, it's just so strong. It's a market that has depth to it, and depth of buyers and depth of quality in the offerings. Australia is still an emerging market in that regard, and I think it gets better. But people want to see results, and I think until it's got a really good honour board, there'll be it'll just reach a level in the market rather than sort of dominate. I think we've got room for it, and I think it'll expand. But at the moment, I think it's actually a really good place to buy rather than sell. So I sort of look after both vendors and purchasers, and if I was advising my clients, I'd suggest they buy there rather than sell, just until that market really strengthens.
Let's talk about clients. Through the magic of Zoom, I'm in Southern California. My aunt's a real estate agent. She gets a lot of clients that are looking loose. Maybe they're thinking about buying a house. They can't necessarily afford a house. How often does somebody call up and quickly you surmise either A, they're way too cautious, even though they're well financed to get involved in the sport of kings, or they've got the gumption, the intestinal fortitude, but they're just not going to have enough dough, enough lettuce, enough greenbacks, as we say over here in the States. How do you parse through potential clients?
Yeah, look, I used to do all sorts of advertising and really try to promote my name and so on. I've since found that word of mouth is really the only way in Australia that you get. It's very much a results-based game, and if you get results, you get clients. You can sustain one, as in some clients for a little while, but even the loyalist of those will eventually probably drift away if you're not getting results. So the beauty with Australia is there really is a spot for everybody. So we're obviously huge in syndication down here. The vast majority of horses would have 5 or 10 owners minimum. So as I was saying before, that accessibility is fantastic. The number of people who have some form of ownership in horses down here is extraordinary in comparison to other countries. And so I guess my short answer would be there is a position for everybody.
Sheamus, how important is it to have a strong leader of that syndicate? I had the pleasure of speaking with Rod Lyons in Nature Strip, an accomplished businessman, got a great ability to communicate, obviously very accomplished in other aspects of his life. Is that a factor in the success, broadly speaking, of a syndicate?
Yeah, massively. Look, I'm probably, if you spoke to a few of my trainers and that sort of thing, I'm not sure if I get called a control freak or anything. I certainly don't try to be, but I do believe that good management of horses is just like any other business. I've noticed with my most successful clients that they're successful in their business ventures, that most of them have very process-driven businesses, that their 2IC and everybody down the line is well aware of how this is supposed to play out. I think since I've really focused on applying those principles to horses, as in where they're bought, who breaks them, who pre-trains them, where they spell, how long they spell for, I've found the more that we manage, the better our results have been, and the more that we have established a process, and once again, results have improved. So I've been lucky that I've got a couple of sort of really good clients that I've been able to bash their ear, and I think processes. It's a sort of business like anyone else. If there's a well-managed syndicate, they should do better.
That makes a lot of sense. It's entertainment, it's fun, it's a sport, but it's also a business. And if you don't have that piece, you're probably not going to be successful. He's Sheamus Mills. I'm AP Harold. It's the Everest Connections. What are your thoughts on with the slot holder situation? And you've got the 12 slots, and you can go early, you can go in the middle, you can go late when you finalize your deal. How would you advise a client who's on either side, whether they're a conglomeration that bought the slot, or they are a horseman who's trying to fill somebody's needs?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting part of the whole equation, and probably what makes that mystique of the Everest last for a sustained period of time. Because of course you've got, the people who get in early trying to grab what they think is the best horse, and then you've got the season to play out after that. Our 3-year-olds, so our returning 3-year-olds. I've just sort of basically come back in the last week or so. So you've got some people who are jumping in early and, as I say, trying to fill their slot then. And then you've got these 3-year-olds who often turn out to be on the day, the horse that you wish you had. So I think it is a matter of holding your nerve, whether it be early or late. If you think that the deal you've done with Nature Strip would be obviously #1 seed. Right. If you think the deal you've done with the owner is viable and not a stretch as far as the financials and so on go, by all means dive in. But as I said, the opposite can be true. It's to hold your nerve, and as you get closer to the race, some horses' form really jumps out of the ground, and I'm sure there would be some slot holders wishing that they hadn't probably fired their bullet too early.
Timing is everything. When you're dealing with these titans of industry who are financing this sport and owners, and they're used to rolling out a product, perhaps in business, 6 months, 5 years, they got plenty of time to review it, make some changes. What do you caution them in horse racing? 50 seconds, minute and a half, minute and 15 seconds, it's do or die, make or break. That's a big change for them, isn't it?
It is a big change. Look, as far as that goes, there's actually a lot of principles in horse racing which successful guys in other industries perhaps struggle with. I would say the #1 thing that sort of doesn't translate is just the luck side of things, and also the consistency. Stock markets show, they can do all the research in the world, and they can show a consistent 6% growth. Property can show a consistent 7% growth. Right. They can really rely upon their results when they invest money in those areas. With horse racing and breeding and the whole bloodstock game, the results can be fantastic, but it can also, the hard thing for them is they can have everything in place. They can control everything. Every other principle they apply can go great. And then one of their horses chips a knee. One of their horses goes in the wind. There's that element of just, I hate to say it, but element of surprise, right, that is uncontrollable, that rarely happens with their other investments.
And finally, Sheamus, if there's a young person out there, a boy or a girl, a teenager, a college student who's debating between going into law, science, military, something a little bit more predictable, I guess military would not be as predictable, but they want to think about getting into something in the entertainment world and sports, maybe even horse racing in particular, the pros and cons, what should they weigh in their head?
Oh, look, I think certainly horse racing, I would say, and I'm not sure about other businesses because this is all I've ever known, but it's a lifestyle rather than a job. Racing down here happens 363 days a year. So, and then when it's not happening in Australia, it's happening somewhere else in the world. So it can consume you, and I think you need to be genuinely in love with it, or you will burn out. But if you are in love with it, such as myself, that old saying about if you love your job, you never work a day in your life is I think very true for racing. You get to meet some amazing people, go some amazing places, and see some amazing things, and all with involvement in what I would say the most important thing is the animal itself. So yeah, it's an amazing game, but you got to love it.
No doubt about it. Next time we speak with you, I want to delve more into your off-the-track equine welfare programs and how much you care about these animals beyond just what we see and beyond the industry, beyond the business. Here's a guy who is literally on the run in his industry 363 days out of the year, down under the island continent, Australia. Sheamus Mills of Sheamus Mills Bloodstock. A pleasure to speak with you again. Look forward to visiting with you many more times, and best wishes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.